Kobe Bryant is one of the greatest players in NBA history. But what if I told you he wasn't even the greatest player of his generation? A lot of people like to point to him as a comparison for Michael Jordan and the guy that everybody points LeBron towards, saying you can't be compared to Michael until you're better than Kobe. But Kobe wasn't even the best player of his generation. No, I think that mantle falls to a guy down south. Man that played in San Antonio for 19 seasons. Timothy Theodore Duncan. Tim Duncan? Really? You think Tim Duncan's better? Yeah, Tim Duncan was the better player overall. Duncan played 19 seasons. He won 5 NBA championships, same as Kobe. He won a championship in 3 different decades: 99, 2003, 05, 07, and 2014. Duncan was a 15-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA selection, 15-time All-Defensive Team selection. Oh, well, Duncan had a great supporting cast. Are you kidding me? He didn't carry those teams. Well, are you going to sit here and tell me that Kobe didn't have a better supporting cast? Kobe had Shaq, arguably one of the most dominant players of all time. Then he went to Pau Gasol, who was one of the best international players of all time. Yeah, Kobe won 5 championships too, in a much different fashion. Duncan was about sustained excellence, being great throughout his entirety of his career. And yes, he had Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, but how much of their development is a testament to the sacrifices Tim Duncan was willing to make? Kobe never put his teammates first. He was a me guy. I'm going to get mine. I'm going to make sure I take care of my business, and if you guys aren't picking up your slack, then we're going to lose. Duncan was all about, let's put this team first and let's win. Many people point to the fact that the highest points that Duncan ever scored in a season was 25.3 in his MVP season. Yeah, if you're going to be an all-time great player, you got to score more than that in a season. That can't be your peak. But that wasn't Duncan. That wasn't his game. He's arguably the most unselfish superstar we've ever seen in the NBA. Humble, not one to go brag to the media. I mean, heck, the biggest story was how he almost left to go to Orlando, but never did. Meanwhile, Kobe's in LA demanding trades because he wants his team. He wants to run a team of his own. He doesn't want to be with Shaq anymore. Meanwhile, Duncan went about his business, put his head down, and kept working. You know who has more MVPs of the two? Oh, that's right. It's Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan has 2 to Kobe's 1. Tim Duncan has 3 Finals MVPs to Kobe's 2. Tim Duncan is one of the most underappreciated stars in NBA history. It's because juxtaposed against Kobe, who was all about the media, wanted to be known, wanted to be heard of. There was a man in a small town, San Antonio, putting his head down and working every single day. And yeah, they had the same number of championships. But put it in the perspective of what San Antonio was before Duncan, and maybe we underappreciate what Tim Duncan accomplished in San Antonio. Before he got there, they'd never won a championship. They've been a mostly successful franchise, but David Robinson before him was always criticized as not being able to win the big game and never being able to get over the hump. Meanwhile, the Lakers, before Kobe, were one of the greatest franchises in NBA history. They had Wilt, Kareem, Magic, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, the list goes on and on. The Spurs had George Gervin, David Robinson, great players, but not on the level of those Lakers. Basketball in San Antonio was dying when Duncan showed up. And he walked into the NBA in 1997-98 on a team with David Robinson, who had won a scoring title, was one of the best players of a generation. And immediately, Tim Duncan was the best player on that team. And Robinson knew it. Robinson took a seat behind Duncan and said, this is your team now, you take it over. And take it over he did, winning a title in his 3rd season, leading that team. Well, many people point to, well, Duncan never really had a great peak. He never was dominant in a playoff series. Never just carried his team to a championship. Well, let me remind you, the 2003 Spurs championship team, it's not that great. They had a lot of really good names. I mean, they had David Robinson. David Robinson was 38, 39 at that point, well past his prime, a shell of his former self, barely averaging 11 points a game. Well, they had Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. Well, Manu nobody knew of at that point. I mean, he played off the bench and played a little bit, but he wasn't the star he turned into. Heck, Tony Parker was a young and immature point guard trying to find his way in the NBA. Greg Popovich benched him in favor of Speedy Claxton down the stretch in the playoffs. Speedy Claxton! You're not trying to tell me he's somebody of note. That team was bad. And Duncan plowed through Shaq and Kobe, fresh off a three-peat, beat up on Dirk and Co. in the playoffs, and put together one of the greatest finals performances in recent memory. In the closeout game, I believe Duncan has 20 points, 20 rebounds, 10 assists, and 8 blocks, almost putting together a quadruple double in the clinching game. That's not dominance. I don't know what is. And there's arguments going back in history that there were a couple blocks that weren't counted that should have been. Duncan almost had a quadruple double in the playoffs, in the finals no less. And yeah, it was in New Jersey's Nets team that was maybe a little limited, but they had been to the finals the year before. It wasn't like they were just some team that got lucky. They had been there before. Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin, Richard Jefferson. Nobody's going to mistake him for the 98 Bulls, 96 Bulls, or the 88-89 Pistons, or the Lakers, Showtime Lakers, or any other team like that. But that was a good team, and Duncan just dominated them. And let's not forget, Duncan's beaten every great player of his generation. He took down Shaq, knocked out Kobe, beat LeBron twice in the finals, prevented Steve Nash from ever winning a championship, wreaked havoc for Dirk Nowitzki in his career, largely helped block Garnett from ever doing anything in Minnesota, beat Steph Curry at the end of his career, knocked down Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook and the Thunder, James Harden. Duncan's beaten everybody in his generation. He has played 19 seasons in the NBA, and he won 50 games 18 times. You know the 19th, the other time, when he didn't win 50 games? Yeah, that was a lockout-shortened season when they only played 50 games. They were 37-13 that season, and the Spurs were on pace to win 50 easily. Are you kidding me? In 19 years, you never had a drop-off, never won less than 50 games or less than a 50-game pace. That is unheard of in today's NBA. That's sustained greatness. And don't forget, Tim Duncan is 3 plays away from potentially one of the greatest careers ever. And I think it's already a great career. Derek Fisher's impossible shot with .4 on the clock in the 2004 Western Conference semis. Duncan had hit a ridiculous shot on the other end to put the Spurs up 1, and Fisher comes back, hits a buzzer beater, and largely knocks the Spurs out of the playoffs that year. Spurs would have won. If they win that, it's 3 in a row. 2006, Spurs battled back from 3-1 deficit against the Mavs in the playoffs, and Manu Ginobili found Dirk Nowitzki in a layup. Mavs force it to overtime. Mavs win the series. 2 plays could have been a 5-peat. 2 plays away. And let's not forget, in 2013, the Spurs have the title locked up. And Ray Allen hits a miraculous corner 3 to send that one to overtime. 3 plays away from 8 titles. And yeah, I know he didn't win them. You can't retrospectively look at it and say, well, Duncan would have won those. He didn't. But he was that close. 5-1 in the NBA Finals. One of the greatest dynasties we've ever seen. over a course of 19 seasons, resurrected a franchise that had been competitive, but they never competed for championships. Duncan turned small-town San Antonio into an NBA powerhouse. When has that happened in NBA history? Greatest franchises are in Boston, Chicago, LA. And San Antonio? San Antonio now has the fourth most titles in NBA history, behind those three I just mentioned. Little old San Antonio. And people want to point to, well, Duncan had Popovich his whole career. Popovich is one of the greatest coaches of all time. Well, Jordan had Phil Jackson. Kobe had Phil Jackson. Magic had Pat Riley. Bill Russell had Red Auerbach. And don't forget, Greg Popovich has said many a time, he wouldn't have a job today if it weren't for Tim Duncan. What Tim Duncan did for that team and that organization is something that's unheard of. As a star player, he allowed his coaches to coach him. And you know why that team was so great? Duncan let Popovich coach him. Popovich got onto him just like every other player, screamed at Duncan. When Duncan screwed up, made it known. And yeah, they had a great relationship. Popovich and Duncan are close, always will be close. But with Duncan, by allowing himself to be coached like that in front of his teammates, puts everybody else in line. Rather than saying, oh, I need to be held to a different standard, Duncan said, no, treat me like one of the guys. So that way, when I get coached by you, Pop, everybody else looks around and, well, Tim's taking it. Tim's taking the criticism to heart. He's improving every day. How dare I do any less? Tim Duncan not only created one of the greatest dynasties ever, he created one of the greatest cultures. San Antonio became a winning culture, a winning dynasty, because of one man. Because the Spurs picked him first in that draft in 1997. He won Rookie of the Year. And you know, of the greatest all-time players, Duncan has a 71.91% win percentage. The only two greats higher are Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Magic played in almost 500 less games. Bird played in nearly 500 less games. The sustained excellence, sustained success will never be paralleled. Now, he didn't wow you with his stats. 6th rebounding all time, 14th in scoring, 5th in blocks. He wasn't a statistical beast, but he won. And isn't that what sports is all about, is winning games and winning championships? There's never been a greater winner. Bill Russell won more titles. But in an era dominated by parity, where there are 30 teams all fighting for a championship, Duncan won 5. In a small market San Antonio, he never missed the playoffs. He won 50 games or was on pace to win 50 games every single season. That's unheard of. Yeah. Greatest of his generation. Many people point to Kobe. But don't forget about Old Man Riverwalk, the big fundamental. For me, I'll take number 21 in San Antonio. Tim Duncan, greatest power forward of all time? No, he's just one of the greatest of all time.